My new foreman, a 28-year-old nepotism hire, deleted my GPS grade data because he thought he knew better than 30 years of experience. He called me just a dirt mover in front of the crew and forced a manual pour on a $100 million foundation. I didn't argue. I just let him bury his career under 3,000 yards of concrete, and then I handed him the bill. Before this story continues, tell me where you watching from today and what's the temperature. I'm warning you now, this level of corporate arrogance might make your blood boil hotter than fresh asphalt. There is a specific kind of silence inside the cab of a D8T dozer when the door is shut and the air conditioning is humming. It's a sanctuary. Outside, the world is chaos dust swirling, diesel engines roaring, and radios crackling, but in here, it's just me and the monitors. I sat back in the seat, my hands resting lightly on the joysticks. At 55, my back wasn't what it used to be, but my eyes were sharper than ever. I watched the Trimble Earthworks display mounted to my right. It showed a 3D model of the site, a massive commercial complex destined to be the new headquarters for a tech giant. The screen told me exactly where my blade was down to the millimeter. "Hank, how's that subgrade looking?" The voice of Ezra, our concrete pump operator, crackled over the radio. I keyed the mic. "Flat as a pool table, Ezra. We're holding it plus or minus a tenth. You could roll a marble from the north corner to the south and it wouldn't stop until it hit the fence." "Show off," Ezra laughed. I smiled. "I wasn't showing off. I was just doing the job. I've been moving dirt since I was 18. I started on an old open cab scraper, eating dust for 12 hours a day, and worked my way up to being the lead operator for Foster Construction. I wasn't just a guy pulling levers. I was a GPS-grade certified operator. I understood the digital topography better than most of the engineers who drew it. The machine beneath me rumbled, a low, powerful vibration that I felt in my bones. We were prepping for the main foundation pour. This wasn't a backyard patio. This was a $100 million slab. If the grade was off, the concrete volume would be wrong. If the concrete was wrong, the structural integrity was compromised. And if that happened, buildings sank. I adjusted the blade height by a fraction of an inch, watching the light bar on my dash turn solid green. Perfect grade. The job had been running smoothly for 6 months. Mr. Foster, the owner, trusted me implicitly. He knew that when Hank Price said the ground was ready, it was ready. But Mr. Foster had recently taken a step back due to health issues, and that vacuum had sucked in something toxic. I saw a white pickup truck tear onto the site, kicking up a cloud of unnecessary dust. It swerved around a parked excavator and screeched to a halt near the job trailer. The door flew open, and out stepped a young man in a pristine, reflective vest that had clearly never seen a speck of mud. It was Hudson Castillo, the nephew, the new project manager. I watched him slam the truck door and march toward the site office, checking his watch as if the dirt itself was wasting his time. My stomach tightened. The peace inside my cab suddenly felt fragile. I had a feeling the golden shovel era of this project where quality mattered more than speed was about to end abruptly. I keyed the mic again. "Heads up, everyone. The prince has arrived." Hudson Castillo didn't walk. He strutted. He was 28 years old, fresh out of a business program, and carried himself with the unearned confidence of someone who has never had to change a flat tire in the rain. I throttled down the dozer and climbed out of the cab to stretch my legs. The mid-morning sun was beating down on the clay, baking the site. I adjusted my hard hat and wiped sweat from my forehead with a bandana. Hudson was already shouting at Naomi, our safety officer. Naomi was tough as nails, a former welder who didn't take nonsense from anyone, but I could see her posture stiffen as Hudson waved the clipboard in her face. I walked over, my steel-toed boots crunching on the gravel. I wanted to hear this. "Ridiculous delays," Hudson was yelling. "Why are the trucks stopped at the gate? I see 3 mixers idling out there." "They're doing the mandatory washout check, Hudson," Naomi said, her voice calm but tight, "and checking the slump. If the mix is too wet, we reject it. Standard protocol. Protocol is costing me money," Hudson snapped. He was wearing dress shoes, actual leather dress shoes on a construction site. I looked down at them, already coated in a fine layer of gray dust. "Wave them through. We need to pour Section B by lunch." "We can't pour Section B," I interrupted. Hudson spun around. He looked at me like I was a piece of equipment that had started talking. "Excuse me?" I said. "We can't pour Section B," I repeated, stepping up next to Naomi. "The compaction test isn't back from the lab yet, and I haven't finished the final trim on the north edge. If you pour now, you're pouring on loose fill." Hudson sneered. It was a subtle thing, a curling of his upper lip that showed exactly what he thought of me. He didn't see a certified expert. He saw a guy in a dirty high-vis vest. "Hank, isn't it?" He looked at his clipboard. though I knew he knew my name. Uncle Foster talks about you, says you're thorough. He made the word sound like an insult. I'm accurate, I corrected. There's a difference. We're 2 weeks behind schedule, Hudson said, tapping the paper with a manicured finger. I promised the investors we'd be vertical by next month. I don't care about a lab test for dirt that's been sitting there for a week. It's hard enough. Pour it. It's not about how hard it feels, I said, trying to keep my voice level. It's about density. If that soil settles under the load, the foundation cracks. You want to explain a cracked slab to the client? Hudson took a step closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and anxiety. I am the project manager. I make the schedule. You operate the bulldozer. Do you understand the hierarchy here? Naomi interjected, stepping between us. Hudson, Hank is right. If we skip the compaction test, I didn't ask you. Hudson barked. He turned back to me, his eyes cold. Get back in your machine. Push the dirt where it needs to go. Let me worry about the engineering. I held his gaze. I've been on site since before he was born. I'd seen guys like him come and go, flashy, loud, and dangerous. Usually they washed out in a month, but this one had the owner's last name in his family tree. Whatever you say, boss, I said quietly. But I'm logging the objection. Log whatever you want, Hudson waved a hand dismissively. Just move the dirt. I walked back to my dozer, my blood simmering. He had no idea what he was doing. But worse than that, he didn't care. The explosion happened 3 days later. It was Tuesday, 10:00 a.m. The biggest pour of the project was scheduled for Friday to main lift slab. This was the heart of the building. The tolerances were incredibly tight. The plans called for a complex slope for drainage, a multi-grade cut that required absolute precision. I had spent the entire morning calibrating the GPS on my blade. I had the digital model loaded, and I was doing a dry run, checking the elevation points against the surveyor's stakes just to be double sure. Suddenly, my screen flickered. The 3D model vanished, replaced by a flat plane. I frowned and tapped the screen. Nothing. The design file had been unloaded. I looked up and saw Hudson standing near the base station, the tripod-mounted GPS transmitter that coordinated all the machines on site. He was messing with the control panel. I killed the engine and jumped down, moving as fast as my knees would allow. Hey, I shouted. What are you doing? Hudson looked up, unbothered. He had a laptop balanced on a stack of pallets and a cable running to the base station. Updating the parameters, he said casually. You wiping the localized calibration, I said, breathless. I was in the middle of a grade check. You can't just hot swap the file while the machines are active. The file was overly complicated, Hudson said, typing something on his keyboard. I simplified the slopes. The architect sent over a revision this morning. We're flattening the gradient to save on concrete volume. I froze. The architect sent a revision. I didn't see a change order. Where are the prints? I have them digitally, Hudson said, tapping his temple. It's all up here and in the cloud. We don't need paper slowing us down. I need to see the specs, Hudson. You can't just flatten a drainage slope. Where is the water going to go? He slammed the laptop shut. The noise echoed across the quiet work site. Workers nearby stopped to watch. Ezra, standing by his pump truck, took off his helmet and watched us. Why do you question everything I do? Hudson asked, his voice rising. Do you think, because you've been here 20 years, you run this company? I think I'm responsible for the grade, I said, stepping closer. And if you change the model without verifying the benchmarks, we're going to pour blind. I need to recalibrate before we move another inch. Hudson laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound. Recalibrate? That takes half a day. We don't have time. Then we make time, I yelled, losing my patience. This is the foundation. You get this wrong, you tear it out. Hudson's face turned red. He pointed a finger at my chest. Listen to me, old man. I'm tired of your technical mumbo-jumbo excuses to slack off. You're overcomplicating a simple task. I am a GPS grade certified operator, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I know what I'm doing. Hudson sneered, loud enough for the entire crew to hear. Certified, please? You push a lever and the machine goes vroom. Don't act like you're a scientist. You're just a dirt mover. That's it. You move dirt from pile A to pile B. The silence that followed was deafening. Just a dirt mover. It was the ultimate insult in our trade. It dismissed the physics, the geometry, the soil mechanics, and the years of skill it took to sculpt the earth. I'm deleting your calibration, Hudson announced, turning back to the base station. I'm setting a flat grade offset. You will grade to the lasers I set manually. No GPS. We do this old school since you claim to be such an expert. He was forcing me to fly blind on a complex site, relying on his manual inputs. If you override the system, I said, my voice eerily calm, I want it in writing. You'll do what you're told. Hudson screamed. Get in the dozer and grade it flat, or get off my site and don't come back for your pension. I looked at him. I looked at the crew watching me, waiting to see if I'd deck him. I took a deep breath. Okay, I said. You want it flat? I'll grade it flat. I'll grade it flat. I turned and walked back to my machine. I didn't argue. I didn't fight, because I knew something Hudson didn't. The machine recorded everything, and if he wanted to dig his own grave, I'd be happy to push the dirt over him. The cab of the D8T felt smaller with Hudson Castillo standing on the track, leaning in through the open door. The air conditioning escaped into the humid afternoon, replaced by the scent of his cologne and the metallic tang of heated hydraulic fluid. Move over, Hudson commanded, gesturing at the control screen. I didn't move. You want to adjust the grade offset? Tell me the number. I'll key it in. I said move, he snapped, reaching past me. His fingers, soft and uncalloused, hovered over the Trimble display. I don't trust you to put in the right figures after your little outburst about calibration. I'm setting the benchmark to the architectural finish floor. Minus 6 inches for the slab. My internal alarm bells went from a dull ring to a deafening siren. Hudson, I said, keeping my voice dangerously steady. The print calls for a structural slab thickness of 18 inches, plus 12 inches of crushed aggregate base. That's a 30-inch cut from finished floor, not 6. He paused, his finger hovering over the screen. For a second, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes, but then he looked at me, the graying temples, the stained vest, the dirt under my fingernails, and his arrogance hardened like quick-set concrete. That was the old design, he lied. I knew he was lying. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened. He had misread the prints, confusing the sidewalk specs with the main foundation. The new revision uses high-density rebar and a thinner pour. It's efficient engineering, something you wouldn't understand. He tapped the screen. Click, click. He manually overrode the GNSS model I had spent weeks refining. He set a static elevation that was, by my mental math, exactly 2 feet higher than it should have been. Combined with the slope he had deleted, we were looking at a grade bust of nearly 3 feet in the deep end. There, he said, stepping back onto the track. Grade to that. Flat, simple, fast. If you hit that number by 5:00 p.m., maybe I won't fire you for insubordination. You're the boss, I said. My hands gripped the joysticks. Make sure you remember that, he sneered, slamming the door. I watched him walk away, talking loudly on his phone. I looked at the screen. The target line had jumped up. The machine now thought the ground needed to be 3 feet higher than reality. If I graded to this, we wouldn't be digging a foundation. We'd be building a pitcher's mound. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I held it low, out of sight from the ground, and snapped a high-resolution photo of the screen. The timestamp was visible, 1:14 p.m. The user log showed manual override Gnambrialtual, override Aidman. Then I engaged the transmission. The tracks clattered as I reversed. I dropped the ripper, spun the massive machine around, and began to push dirt. I wasn't building a foundation anymore. I was building a monument to Hudson's stupidity. By 4:30 p.m., the site looked wrong to anyone who knew what they were looking at. The excavation was too shallow. The hole for the foundation was barely a depression. To a layman, it looked like a nice flat pad of dirt. To a master operator, it looked like a disaster waiting to happen. I parked the dozer in the lineup, idled down the turbo, and let the engine cool. I climbed out and walked straight to the safety trailer. Naomi was at her desk, filing permits. She looked up as I entered, her expression wary. Hank, please tell me you didn't flatten the tire on Hudson's truck. Tempting, I said, grabbing a daily field report form from the rack. But no, I need you to sign this. I slapped the clipboard onto her desk. I filled out the notes section in excruciating detail. 1400, directed by Project Manager H. Castillo to ignore previous GPS model. PM Castillo manually entered grade elevation X and deleted drainage slope parameters. Operator advised PM that this contradicts structural sheets S102 and S104. PM confirmed order to proceed with manual override. Grading completed to PM's specifications. Naomi read it, her eyes widening. She looked up at me, then back at the paper. Hank, if this is true, the rebar crew is going to be tying steel in the air tomorrow. The concrete guys, they won't even be able to pour. They'll pour, I said grimly. Hudson is bringing in a new subcontractor for the concrete. The cheapest bidder. They won't check the grade. They'll just set up forms on the dirt I prepped and pump the mud. This is going to cost hundreds of thousands to fix, she whispered. Millions, I corrected. Sign it as a witness to the conversation, Naomi. Just acknowledging that you heard him give the order. She hesitated, the pen hovering. She had a mortgage. She had kids. Crossing the owner's nephew was dangerous. If you don't sign it, I said softly, when this goes south, he's going to blame the safety checks. He's going to say you distracted the crew. He already yelled at you about the washouts today. That struck a nerve. She scowled, pressed the pen to the paper, and signed her name with a sharp scratch. Naomi R. Make me a copy, I said, and put the original in the lockbox, not the open file. She nodded and ran it through the scanner. I folded my copy and tucked it into my breast pocket, right next to my heart. It was the only shield I had. I walked out to my truck. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the site. The flat pad of dirt I had graded looked deceptively perfect. It was smooth, it was level, and it was catastrophically wrong. My workshop is a detached garage behind my house, filled with the smell of sawdust and old oil. It's where I restore vintage motorcycles, a hobby that requires patience and precision, two things Hudson Castillo lacked entirely. I sat on a stool next to a disassembled 1974 Norton Commando, a beer sweating on the workbench next to me. It was 8:00 p.m. The house was quiet. My wife had passed 3 years ago, and the silence usually bothered me. Tonight, though, I needed to think. I pulled my phone out and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in 2 years. Jose Myers. I hit dial. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when a breathless voice answered. Hank? Is everything okay? I'm fine, Jose, I said, taking a sip of beer. How's the leg? Better than it would be if you hadn't pulled that shoring wall off me, Jose replied. The humor was there, but underlying it was the serious tone of a man who remembered owing his life to someone. It aches when it rains, but I can still climb a ladder. What's going on? You never call just to chat about the weather. I need your eyes, I said, and I need your drone. You working a side job? No. I'm working a job that's about to go up in flames. I need a shadow survey. There was a pause on the line. Jose was a forensic surveyor now. He worked for insurance companies and high-end law firms, mapping accident scenes and construction failures with LiDAR drones that could measure the volume of a pile of sand to the ounce. A shadow survey? Jose asked. Off the books? Strictly. I need you to fly the Foster site tonight. I need a full topographical map of the subgrade I just finished, overlaid against the original architectural plans. I need proof of exactly where the dirt is sitting right now. Why tonight? Because the rebar comes tomorrow, and the concrete pumps come Friday. Once they pour, the dirt is gone forever. I need the evidence of what's under the concrete before they hide it. Hank, Jose said, his voice dropping. If I fly a drone over a private site without a warrant or a work order, and they catch me, they won't catch you, I said. No security guard, just a padlock on the gate, and the project manager is a kid who thinks LiDAR is a type of soft drink. Who's the PM? Hudson Castillo. Jose let out a low whistle. The nephew? I heard he got run off a site in Miami for ordering a crane lift in high winds. That's the one. He manually overrode my GPS. He's pouring the foundation 3 feet high. Jesus, Jose breathed. 3 feet? That's not an error, Hank. That's negligence. That's why I need the map, Jose. When the lawyers come, and they will come, he's going to say I fell asleep at the wheel. I need a bulletproof vest. I'll be there in an hour, Jose said instantly. Leave the back gate unlocked. Bring the thermal camera too, I added. Why? Because revenge is a dish best served with high-resolution data. The site was deserted, save for the occasional flash of a distant highway headlight. I stood in the shadow of my parked pickup, watching Jose Myers unpack his gear. Jose was leaner than I remembered, his movements precise and practiced. He set up a tripod with a mounted total station laser, then pulled out a sleek, black drone case. This wasn't a hobbyist toy. It was a commercial-grade Matrice 300 RTK, equipped with a LiDAR sensor worth more than my truck. Clear skies, Jose murmured, checking his tablet. Wind is negligible. I can map this whole pad in 15 minutes with sub-centimeter accuracy. Just stay high enough that the security cameras on the trailer don't pick up the rotor noise, I warned. Way ahead of you, Jose said. He tapped the screen. The drone whirred to life, a low hum that quickly faded as it ascended into the darkness. On his controller screen, a ghost-like point cloud began to form. Millions of laser pulses were bouncing off the dirt I had graded that afternoon, building a perfect 3D replica of the site. I watched the screen over his shoulder. The heat map showed elevation changes in brilliant colors, blue for low, red for high. "Whoa," Jose whispered. He pointed to a large swath of red in the center of the pad. "Is that the elevator pit?" "Supposed to be," I said grimly. "But look at the elevation." Jose tapped a point on the screen. Elevation 104.2 feet. He switched tabs to the digital architectural plans he had preloaded. Plan calls for 101.2 feet. "Exactly," I said. 3 feet high, and the grade beams. Jose moved the drone over the perimeter. "Should be 2 feet deep," I said. "They're barely 6 inches, Jose confirmed, shaking his head. "Hank, this isn't a foundation. It's a sidewalk. If they pour a 5-story building on this, it'll crack before the rim cutting," I finished. The drone finished its sweep and returned to the landing pad. Jose quickly packed up, his face serious. "I've got the raw data," he said. "I'll process it tonight. I can generate a cuts-fill report that proves exactly how much dirt was moved versus how much should have been moved according to the prints. It'll show a massive discrepancy." "Good," I said. "Keep it safe. Don't send it to anyone yet. Not even me." "Why?" "Because," I said, looking toward the dark silhouette of the job trailer. "I need them to pour the concrete first." Jose looked at me, shocked. "Hank, if they pour on this grade, they'll waste $100 grand in concrete and labor. And then they'll have to jackhammer it all out. That's malicious." "It's not malicious," I said, my voice hard. "It's a lesson. Hudson won't listen to warnings. He won't listen to reason. The only thing people like him listen to is a catastrophic loss on a balance sheet." Jose stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're a scary man when you're quiet, Hank." "Just get me the data," I said. "And Jose, thanks. Anytime," he said, clasping my shoulder, "for the guy who dug me out." Friday morning arrived with a vengeance. The site was buzzing. A fleet of concrete mixer trucks was lined up down the access road, their drums turning lazily. The pump truck, operated by Ezra, and its boom extended like a giant robotic arm over the center of the foundation. Hudson was everywhere at once, screaming into his phone, waving his arms at the subcontractors, and generally creating an atmosphere of panic. "Let's go! Let's go!" he shouted. "We're burning daylight! Pour it!" I sat in my pickup, drinking coffee. My dozer was parked. My job was done. Technically, I should have been helping with the grade checking during the pour, but Hudson had explicitly banned me from the active zone. "Stay out of the way, old man," he had told me that morning. "Let the professionals handle the concrete." So I watched. I watched as the first truck backed up to the pump hopper. I watched as the gray sludge began to flow. I watched as the laborers, a crew I didn't recognize, likely the lowest bidder Hudson could find, began to spread the concrete. They weren't checking the depth. They were just filling the forms. Usually a surveyor is present during a major pour to shoot grades in real time. I didn't see one. Hudson had evidently decided that a surveyor was an unnecessary expense, or perhaps he was just too arrogant to think he needed one. Ezra, up in the pump truck cab, caught my eye. He gave a small shrug, as if to say, "What can I do?" The concrete flowed, yard after yard, truck after truck. I did some mental math. A foundation this size with the correct depth should take about 800 yards of concrete, but because the grade was 3 feet too high in the deep sections, they were pouring significantly less volume. They were going to finish way too early. Sure enough, by 1:00 p.m., the forms were full. Hudson was beaming. He was high-fiving the foreman of the concrete crew. "Record time," I heard him yell. "We saved 20% on material." I told you the old estimates were bloated. He walked over to my truck, a smug grin plastered on his face. "See that?" he said, pointing to the glistening wet slab. "Done, under budget, ahead of schedule. And you said we couldn't do it." I rolled down my window. "Did you verify the top of concrete elevation?" I asked quietly. "It's perfect," Hudson scoffed. "Flat as a pancake, just like I told you to grade it." "And the anchor bolts?" I asked. "Are they set deep enough?" "They're set to the template," he said, dismissing me with a wave. "You worry too much. Maybe it's time you retired, Hank. This fast-paced world seems a little much for you." I didn't respond. I just started my truck. "Where are you going?" Hudson asked. "Home," I said. "My shift is over. Enjoy your victory lap, Hudson." I drove away, leaving him standing there gloating over a $1 million mistake that was currently hardening in the sun. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety. Even though I knew I was right, there's a terrible weight in watching a disaster unfold. I spent Saturday organizing my documentation. I printed out the photo of the GPS screen. I made copies of Naomi's signed report. I had Jose's digital survey on a secure USB drive. On Sunday night, I got a text from Ezra. Ezra, something's weird. The steel erectors showed up today to stage the columns. They're saying the anchor bolts are sticking out too high. I smiled grimly. Hank, how high, Ezra? Like 3 feet too high relative to the grade beams. They can't set the base plates? Of course. The anchor bolts had been set using the correct elevation from the prints because the bolt template was prefabricated. But the concrete had been poured to Hudson's incorrect higher elevation. Or rather, the concrete was poured on top of dirt that was too high. The bolts were probably buried, or if they had been set relative to the forms, the entire building footprint was now floating 3 feet higher than the architectural drawings allowed. Monday morning was going to be interesting. I arrived at the site at 6:30 a.m. The gate was open. Usually the site is quiet at this hour. Today, it was a shouting match. A black luxury sedan was parked next to Hudson's truck. I recognized it immediately. It belonged to Eleanor, the client representative. And next to it was Mr. Foster's vintage Land Cruiser. The owner was here. I grabbed my thermos and walked toward the trailer. Hudson was standing outside, looking pale. He was arguing with a man in a hard hat, the steel erection foreman. Bolts are useless, the foreman was yelling. I can't set a column on a bolt that has 2 threads showing. The embedment depth is wrong. We can extend them. Hudson stammered. We can weld extensions on a seismic structural column. The foreman laughed in his face. Are you insane? That's a code violation. You have to tear it out. Tear what out? Hudson whispered. The concrete, the foreman said. All of it. Mr. Foster stepped out of the trailer. He looked frail, leaning on a cane, but his eyes were sharp. He saw me approaching. Hank, he said, his voice carrying over the noise. Get in here. Hudson spun around. Uncle Foster, wait. This is Hank's fault. He's the one who graded the pad. He messed up the elevations. Mr. Foster looked at Hudson, then at me. Is that true, Hank? Mr. Foster asked. No, sir, I said, calm as a frozen lake. He's lying, Hudson screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. He's incompetent. He's been trying to sabotage me since day one. He set the grade wrong, and I trusted him. Inside, Mr. Foster said. Both of you, now. We walked into the trailer. The air was thick with tension. Eleanor sat at the conference table, reviewing a set of blueprints. She looked furious. Mr. Price, Eleanor said without looking up, the survey we just ran shows the finished floor elevation is 34 inches higher than the design. Can you explain why you built a hill instead of a foundation? I didn't, I said. Liar! Hudson slammed his hand on the table. You operated the dozer. You controlled the blade. I controlled the blade, I agreed. But I didn't control the data. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive. What is that? Hudson asked, his eyes darting to the drive. That, I said, placing it on the table in front of Mr. Foster, is the black box. Mr. Foster stared at the USB drive on the conference table like it was a loaded gun. The silence in the job trailer was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner and the distant rhythmic beeping of a backing truck. A black box? Mr. Foster repeated, his voice raspy. He looked older than I remembered. The stress of the company's recent financial struggles etched into the deep lines of his face. Hank, we build office parks, not airplanes. What are you talking about? It's a colloquialism, I said, keeping my hands folded on the table. That drive contains a forensic LiDAR scan of the subgrade performed the night before the pour. It also contains the raw data logs from the DAT's computer system. Every keystroke, every grade adjustment, every user login. Hudson let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. This is absurd! You're going to trust a thumb drive this operator pulled out of his pocket? He probably spent all weekend photoshopping some fake report. It's not a report, Hudson, I said calmly. It's raw data. You can't Photoshop a point cloud with millions of data points. And you certainly can't fake the machine's internal hard drive log without encryption keys. Only the manufacturer has. Eleanor, the client representative, leaned forward. She was a sharp woman in her 40s with zero tolerance for incompetence. Mr. Foster, she said, her voice like ice. If there is data showing the grade was incorrect before the pour and your team proceeded anyway, that is gross negligence. My structural engineer is on his way. But I don't need a survey to tell me something is wrong. I can see it from here. She pointed out the window. From this angle, the massive gray slab of the foundation looked pristine. But to a trained eye, the perspective was off. The horizon line of the concrete was too high against the surrounding grade stakes. Hudson claims the grade is perfect, Mr. Foster said, looking at his nephew. He claims you said it, Hank. I set it to the parameters entered into the machine, I corrected. Parameters entered manually by Hudson Castillo at 1:14 p.m. last Tuesday. Liar, Hudson shouted, standing up. I never touched your machine. I told you to follow the plans. You must have misread the survey stakes because you're getting old and your eyesight is shot. I didn't flinch. My eyesight is 20/20, Hudson, and my memory is even better. Mr. Foster picked up the USB drive. He turned it over in his fingers. I'll have IT look at this. But right now, we deal with the physical reality. The steel foreman says the bolts are wrong. Let's go see exactly how wrong they are. He stood up, grabbing his cane. Hudson scrambled to open the door for him, playing the dutiful nephew, but his eyes were darting around the room, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. After you, I said to Hudson. He glared at me. Don't think you're getting out of this, Price. When this concrete comes back clean, you're fired for insubordination and slander. If the concrete is clean, I said, putting on my hard hat, I'll quit. The walk to the elevator pit was a grim procession. Mr. Bunn. Foster led the way, limping slightly, but setting a brisk pace. Eleanor walked beside him, talking rapidly on her phone to her legal team. Hudson trailed behind them, and I brought up the rear. The elevator pit is the heart of a high-rise foundation. It's the deepest point, a reinforced concrete box where the elevator cars descend. The specs called for the pit floor to be 5 feet below the main slab elevation to accommodate the hydraulic buffers and the sump pump. When we arrived at the edge of the pit, the problem wasn't just visible. It was comical. The steel erection crew was standing around, arms crossed, looking at the hole. Or rather, the lack of one. Morning, boss, the steel foreman said to Mr. Foster, spitting a stream of tobacco juice onto the dirt. We got a problem. Show me, Foster said. The foreman pointed a tape measure into the pit. Prints call for a pit depth of 60 inches from finished floor. I'm measuring 24. You're missing 3 feet of depth. Hudson pushed forward. That's a measurement error. You're measuring from the wrong benchmark. The foreman looked at Hudson with pure disdain. I'm measuring from the anchor bolts you set, kid. The bolts are at the right elevation for the building. The concrete floor is just up here. He held his hand level with his knees. The pit is too shallow. You can't fit the elevator gear in there. If we install the car, the doors will open 3 feet above the lobby floor. We can ramp it, Hudson blurted out. We can just adjust the lobby grade. Make a feature out of it. Steps up to the elevators. Eleanor laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Steps to an elevator in an ADA-compliant commercial building? Hudson, are you suggesting we violate federal disability laws because you can't read a ruler? No, I mean, we can cut the concrete. Hudson stammered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning breeze. We can saw cut the floor and dig it out. Cut through 3 feet of cured concrete reinforced with number 8 rebar, I asked quietly. And the water stop? You'll sever the waterproofing membrane. The pit will flood every time it rains. Mr. Book. Foster looked at the pit. He looked at the massive expanse of the main slab. He did the mental math that every contractor dreads. It's not just the pit, Foster whispered. If the pit is high, the whole slab is high. The perimeter grade beams, the loading dock, none of it will line up with the street. He turned to Hudson. His face was pale. Hudson, did you change the grade offset? No, Hudson shrieked. I swear, it was Hank. He's the operator. He must have hit the wrong button. He's trying to sabotage me because he hates that I'm in charge. He's jealous, Uncle Foster. He thinks he should be running this site. I stepped forward. Mr. Foster, look at the cold joint on the south wall. You can see the lift lines. That concrete is sitting on 30 inches of fill that shouldn't be there. That fill was placed Tuesday afternoon, by me, under direct verbal orders. He's lying. Hudson was hysterical now. He's a bitter old man. He did it on purpose. Mr. Foster closed his eyes. He looked physically pained. The legacy of his company, built over 40 years, was literally crumbling, or rather, hardening into a useless monolith right in front of him. This is a total tear-out, the steel foreman said, delivering the death blow. You gotta jackhammer the whole thing, $2 million minimum, plus delays. Back in the trailer, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to toxic. Hudson had gone on the offensive. He realized that the physical evidence was damning, so his only survival strategy was to destroy my credibility entirely. "I want him off the site," Hudson hissed, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Right now. I want security to escort him out." "Hudson, sit down," Mr. Foster said, rubbing his temples. "No, I won't sit down while this laborer destroys our family name." Hudson pointed a trembling finger at me. "He's incompetent, Uncle. I've been covering for him for weeks. He's slow. He questions authority. He refuses to use the modern software. And now this is malicious compliance at best, and industrial sabotage at worst." "Sabotage?" I asked. "By following your instructions?" "I never gave those instructions," Hudson roared. "There is no record of those instructions." "Actually," I said, "there is. I didn't reach for the paper in my pocket yet. I wanted him to commit fully to the lie." "There is no paper trail," Hudson insisted, turning to Mr. Foster. "I run a digital office. If I had ordered a grade change, there would be an email, a change order, a digital signature. There is nothing, which proves he went rogue." "Or," Eleanor interjected, looking up from her notes, "it proves you bypassed protocol to speed up the schedule." "Whose side are you on?" Hudson snapped at the client rep. "The side of the person who didn't just cost me 6 weeks of schedule," Eleanor replied coolly. Hudson turned back to Mr. Foster. "Uncle, you have to choose. Me, flesh and blood, the future of this company, or him, a guy who moves dirt. If you don't fire him right now, I walk, and I take the digital keys to the project management server with me." It was a bluff, but a dangerous one. Hudson held the administrative passwords. He could lock the company out of its own data. "Mr. Doc." Foster looked at me. There was apology in his eyes, but also weakness. He was tired. He didn't have the fight in him to battle his own family in front of a client. "Hank," Mr. Foster said softly, I think it's best if you go home for a few days." "You're suspending me?" I asked. "Pending an investigation," Foster said, looking down at his hands, "until we sort out exactly who entered what into that machine." "He's not just suspended," Hudson gloated. "He's fired. I want his badge. I want his keys." "Just go home, Hank," Foster said. "Please." I stood up slowly. I looked at Hudson, who was grinning with the triumph of a playground bully who thinks he's won because the teacher looked away. "Okay," I said, "I'll go home." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my truck keys. I placed them on the table. "But before I go," I said, turning to look Hudson dead in the eye, "you should know that the D8T isn't the only thing that records data." "Get out!" Hudson screamed. I walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the knob. "I'll be waiting for your call, Mr. Foster," I said, "and when you call, the price for my consulting services goes up." I walked out into the bright, blinding sun. I was suspended. The project was ruined. But as I walked to my personal truck, I patted my breast pocket. The folded piece of paper, the Daily Field report, signed by Naomi, was still there. Hudson thought he had won the battle. He didn't realize he had just surrendered the war. I didn't go home. I went to Jose's office. Jose Myers runs his forensic surveying firm out of a converted warehouse that looks more like a tech startup than a construction vendor. Monitors lined the walls, displaying point clouds and CAD overlays. When I walked in, Jose was already on the phone. He held up a hand, silencing me, and put the call on speaker. "Cannot verify the data integrity without the source key," a voice said. It was Hudson. He was panicking. "I understand, Mr. Bay. Castillo," Jose said, winking at me, "but as the surveyor of record for the data on that drive, I can assure you the timestamps are encrypted. If you try to delete them, it bricks the file. And since I already sent a cloud backup to the client's legal team, deleting the local copy would be unwise." "You sent it to Eleanor." Hudson's voice cracked. "A standard procedure for a forensic audit requested by a site operator," Jose lied smoothly. "Hank Price requested the scan. The data belongs to him. And now, I assume, to the client." There was a click. Hudson had hung up. "He's terrified," Jose said, spinning his chair around. "I just got a call from Mr. Foster's secretary. They want us both in the boardroom at 2:00 p.m. They want to review the black box." "Did you process the logs?" I asked. Jose pulled up a screen. It showed a timeline of the DAT's activity. "Look at this," Jose said, pointing to a red block on the timeline. Tuesday, 1:14 p.m. The machine was idling. Then a user login admin, Dubersky AC Castillo. Following that, a manual entry for global elevation offset plus 36.0 inches, and a command to disable the slope constraint. He manually raised the grade, I said, shaking my head. He literally told the machine to build a podium. And here's the kicker, Jose grinned. He did it using his own login credentials. The idiot didn't even use the guest account. It's his digital fingerprint on the murder weapon. He's going to say I stole his password, I said. Let him try, Jose said, because the machine also has a cabin camera. It takes a snapshot upon admin login for security. He clicked a file. A grainy fichier photo appeared on the screen. It showed Hudson Castillo, clear as day, leaning into the cab, tapping the screen. Got him, I whispered. We have the motive, the method, and the mugshot, Jose said, closing the laptop. Let's go get your job back. The boardroom at Foster Construction was a place of mahogany and silence. Usually it was reserved for signing contracts. Today it was an execution chamber. Mr. Foster sat at the head of the table. Eleanor sat to his right, her legal team video conferenced in on a large screen. Hudson sat on the left, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. When Jose and I walked in, Hudson stood up. He can't be here, Hudson shouted. He's suspended. And who is this? Another one of his drinking buddies? Sit down, Hudson, Eleanor said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of $100 million contract. Mr. Myers is a recognized forensic expert, and Mr. Myers is a recognized forensic expert, and Mr. Price is the only person in this room who seems to know how to build a foundation. We took our seats. Mr. Myers, Mr. Foster said, his voice heavy. Please explain what we're looking at. Jose connected his laptop to the main screen. The timeline appeared, then the grade map, then the photo of Hudson in the cab. The silence in the room was absolute. At 1:14 p.m. on Tuesday, Jose narrated, admin user Hudson Castillo accessed the grade control system. He manually overrode the GPS model, adding a 3-foot positive offset. This action directly caused the foundation to be poured at the wrong elevation. The estimated cost to demo and re-pour is $2.4 million. Hudson's face went from pale to purple. That's doctored. Deepfake. You can do anything with AI these days. It's a raw system log, Jose said. It's encrypted. I don't care, Hudson screamed, slamming his fist on the table. Hank did this. He stole my password. He set me up. He's just a jealous old operator who wants to ruin me. Mr. Foster, I said, speaking for the first time. May I? Mr. Foster nodded slowly. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the folded, crinkled piece of paper I had carried for days. The daily field report. Digital data is great, I said, sliding the paper across the mahogany table to Mr. Foster. But I'm old school. I like paper. Mr. Foster put on his reading glasses. What is this? Hudson sneered. It's a daily field report, Mr. Foster read aloud. 14:00 hours. Project Manager Castillo directed operator to ignore GPS model and proceed with manual grade. Witnessed by Safety Officer Naomi R. Mr. Foster looked up. Naomi signed this. She did, I said. At 4:30 p.m. that same day. Before the pour, before the survey, before the error was discovered, Hudson slumped back in his chair. The air went out of him. The lie had collapsed. He couldn't claim I hacked the machine. He couldn't claim it was a deepfakes. He had been witnessed giving the order. You, Hudson whispered, staring at me with pure hatred. You documented it. You knew. I told you, I said coldly. I'm accurate. There's a difference. Eleanor cleared her throat. Mr. Foster, my client is terminating the contract with Hudson Castillo effective immediately. If he remains on site, we pull the project. Mr. Foster looked at his nephew. He looked at the photo on the screen. He looked at the photo on the screen. He looked at the signed report. Hudson, Mr. Foster said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Hand over your badge and your keys. Uncle, Hudson pleaded. Now, Mr. Foster roared, slamming his cane against the floor. Get out of my building! Hudson stood up, trembling. He threw his keys on the table and stormed out, the heavy door slamming behind him with a finality that echoed in the silence. The sound of 36 jackhammers is the loudest noise on earth. It's a rhythmic, bone-shaking percussion that signals destruction. But to me, standing on the edge of the site a week later, it sounded like justice. The demolition was in full swing. The 3-foot mistake was being torn out, chunk by expensive chunk. Expensive music, isn't it? I turned to see Eleanor standing next to me. She was wearing a hard hat and a high-vis vest over her suit. Mozart for the shareholders, I replied. Mr. Foster is taking a leave of absence, she said, looking at the crumbling concrete. The board voted to remove him from day-to-day operations. The nepotism almost bankrupted the firm. Who's running the show? I asked. I am for the client side, she said, but we need a new superintendent for the contractor side, someone who knows the site, someone who documents everything, someone who isn't afraid to tell a project manager they're an idiot. She turned to me. We want you, Hank. Me? I laughed. I'm just a dirt mover. Remember? You're the only person who caught a $2 million error before it happened, she corrected. We're offering you the superintendent role. Salary match, plus 20%, full benefits, and you pick your own team. I looked at the site. I looked at the dozer sitting idle. I looked at the crew, Ezra, Naomi, the guys who had been pushed around by Hudson for months. I pick my own team? I asked. Anyone you want, she said. Naomi gets a raise, I said immediately, and Jose Myers is the exclusive surveyor for the rebuild. Done, Eleanor said, extending her hand. I shook it.